This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/MacVoices. And by the Mac Voices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter for Mac Voices viewers and listeners. Get the inside scoop on all the Mac Voices news by visiting MacVoices.com/newsletter to subscribe. Welcome to MacNotables on Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it seems like we keep having changes in our panel, and I mean not changes as in new people coming or leaving, but just sort of changes in status, and that's why we're here to talk to Mr. Ted Landau. Ted, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Great, as always, to be back. Thank you, Chuck.
It is indeed. And you dropped a little bombshell as we record this earlier this week, where you said you are hanging up your virtual pen.
Yes, I am officially retired. It took me a little while to get around to writing that thing. It didn't happen this week, but I wrote about it this week. I mean, the background is essentially it's a self-induced retirement, obviously. As a freelance writer, you don't exactly get laid off. But I have been gradually pulling back, as we've talked about here. I think people who have regularly listened to our podcast know that I've been pulling back from doing things for a couple of years now, and including deciding last year that I was going to give my last Macworld Expo talk and gave a sort of goodbye talk there, and then afterwards Macworld Expo shut down. So probably good timing that I gave that talk, because I wouldn't get a chance to give it again this year. But in any case, yeah. So I've been doing that, and I wrote a column for Macworld last December, and I was due to do bugs and fixes. And then, if you remember, there was all that turmoil last December at Macworld, where the entire staff was laid off and a new editorial staff largely replaced it, and kind of bummed me out. Even though I think the new people are fine, they're very good actually. I worked with them a little bit, and they seem great. But it just bummed me out that all these people were gone. And Chris Breen, who was my direct editor over, for my bugs and fixes columns, not really for my editorials, but Chris was editor for my bugs and fixes columns, and then he left to take a job at Apple. He had been one of the few people that had not left in the original layoff period, and so it seemed like anybody and everybody I knew there was gone. And Macworld, the reason I focus on Macworld is it was the only place left that I was doing any sort of professional writing. And by professional, I mean getting paid for it, as opposed to my own personal blog, which I do just for fun. And so I just kept putting off writing another column. I had bugs and fixes I was supposed to do, and I didn't do it. And I had a couple of op-ed ideas, and I just said, I don't know. And nobody at Macworld bugged me about it. So it wasn't like they were saying, hey, Ted, where is this thing you were doing? They seemed to be doing perfectly fine without me, which sort of encouraged me to think that I really wasn't going to be a big deal if I left. But I did contact Susie Oakes at one point and had a conversation with her about, saying, we should touch base because I haven't really established any contact with you in terms of what you're expecting and what I'm expecting. We had a very pleasant conversation, worked everything out for me to just continue writing, but I just never did. And so finally, around the end of April, I thought about it, and I said, I'm just never going to do this anymore. It's become clear almost by default, more than a conscious decision on my part, that I really didn't want to continue doing it. And so I emailed Susie and told her that I was done, that they shouldn't expect to see anything more from me, and she wrote back something very gracious, and it was very nice. And then I looked around and said, well, I think that means I'm retired, because that was the only thing I was doing besides that was making any money. So I think I just said I was retired, and so at that point I started working on a retirement column just to make it public. Somehow, I don't know. I guess it's not important that you make it public, but if you're retired and nobody knows you're retired, because it hasn't seemed much different than what I had been doing, which was pretty much nothing anyway. It seemed a good idea to sort of just make a public statement about it and put a period at the end of it, so to speak. And so that's what I did. And by the time I got around to finishing that column with all the other things I was doing, it was this Monday. And so that's what happened. So I posted it on Monday.
And I saw the notice, of course, first on Twitter, and right after that, there was this huge flood of accolades from friends and admirers, and all, as there absolutely should be. You deserve all of those, probably times about 10. A couple people talking about when they first met you, or the influence you've had on their careers, which I think is probably one of the greatest tributes that you could have. It's just not going to be the same without you, without some of your wisdom, and especially your troubleshooting articles, and the fact that you take things and you've always dug deep into them to figure out what was going on and help us understand. And that was such a valuable thing, and I know a lot of us are going to miss it.
Well, I thank you for saying that. I'm sure life in the Mac community, Apple community, will go on just fine without me, and other people will solve problems. I'm not too concerned about that. Though I getting to what you were saying, it is heartening and sometimes really surprising to see some of the things that people are saying. I know. I mean, some of the nice comments reflect things that I already know because I get positive feedback periodically. You'll win some award, or someone will say, this is a great article or whatever, and so some of it, rings true to that sense. But what I rarely get over the course of writing is people saying, "Wow, you really influenced me," or my career turned for the better because of the things that you provided for me and stuff like that. People rarely say that sort of thing, except at an occasion like this, and so those sort of things really take me back, because I'm just sitting here writing, my little keyboard here, and comes out and gets posted, and after that I don't give much thought to what effect it might be having. And so it's kind of nice, yeah. And this week also, David Letterman resigned, obviously triggered by my retired. I guess I should say, not resigned, triggered by my retirement. And he made a comment that I think about times like this too, where he said, all the praise he's getting and everything like that, he says, save a little bit of it for my funeral. and I feel that way a little bit too. After a while, I think, wow, this is. I'm not dead yet. I'm still here, and I'll be writing at least without getting paid for it from time to time, and hopefully doing some podcasts here with you as well.
That's something we'll just touch on right quick, that you and I have talked a little bit, and you will be coming back. So this is hardly the end of Ted Landau on MacNotables, but it will be scaled back a bit depending on your schedule and your inclination and what there is to talk about. But definitely, you're always welcome here anytime you want to come back.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and it will be scaled back. I think, one of the things we used to do is talk about, one of the prime things we would talk about when we have these sessions is recent stuff that I had written. Both because it was usually timely, because I was writing about recent events, and because I had written it, and that's what we were here to talk about. But since I'm not going to be writing very much, I fear we're going to have less to talk about. So, and I probably am not going to make quite the effort I have been to keep up with all the latest stuff that's going on. And so I expect we'll meet here from time to time for at least a while, and who knows, it may taper off eventually as well. So
yeah. We'll take it as it comes. I know I have to share, though, a couple things. My interaction with you, I remember, and you were giving a presentation. You didn't know I existed. The first time I ever saw you physically.
It's hard to remember a time when I didn't know you existed, but okay.
Well, that's nice. But it was Macworld in Boston at the Bayside Expo Center. I remember seeing you I'm not sure who your publisher was at that point, but in a booth talking about sad Macs bombs and disasters. Mm. And, it's like, oh, wow, that's Ted Landau. That's what he looks like. All right. And then a few years later, we ended up at a dinner by O'Reilly. We ended up sitting at the table together, and I think that was the first time that I recall us really meeting and interacting a bit. And then a few years later, I think I called you and said, "Hey, I'm trying to start up this MacNotables thing. Would you be interested?" And you were very gracious and said, "Sure." And here we are. How many episodes later? We've covered so much. I admire you so much, and I consider you such a close personal friend. And sometimes we finish these things, and it's like, holy cow! I was talking to Ted Landau.
Well, I live with him. It's not that big a deal. Right?
Well, it is for us, because it's what you were saying, I think, was so interesting, that you sit there, you type out your articles, you don't really appreciate the impact you're having on people.
Well, yeah. Apparently, from the feedback I was getting for the last couple of days, it's there. So it's very nice. Yeah, I can't say that it isn't fun to read that sort of stuff. Yeah, it is.
So it's probably appropriate to ask, do you have any particular plans for this retirement, or is it just going to be kind of take it as it comes?
I think it's going to be take it as it comes. No, there's nothing particular. The fact that I've sort of been sliding into retirement for the last couple of years makes it pretty easy because it's not like it's not like the person that has been working 60 hours a week at some high pressure, stressful job and then suddenly retires and wakes up the next morning and says, "Oh my God, I don't even have to go into work tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to do." My life between my retirement announcement and before and after, my life has hardly changed. I was living pretty much a retired life before the official retirement, and now it's just official. So I'm doing all sorts of little things, and I think about occasionally about trying to commit to something that'll occupy my time in a volunteer sort of way, giving back, so to speak, for some of because I really think I'm one of the fortunate people in life. I've been very lucky to have all the good things that have happened to me. And Naomi and I, my wife Naomi and I have been working on that, and so actually something's coming up pretty soon that may turn out to be exactly what I'm looking for. I don't want to talk about it yet, but I'll get back to you if it does.
Good. Well, that's great. That's great. Ted, a couple of shows ago, we talked to Adam and Tanya Angst about publishing 25 years of tidbits.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll ask you the same question I asked them. Over your career, though, theirs was about their publication, but over your career, what lessons have you learned? What lessons for success or happiness or, whatever, however you want to take it? What are some of the most important things that you think you've discovered or that helped you along in being successful?
Don't overeat. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have any particular words of wisdom. I would say, for me, this may not work for everybody, but for me, I've had the best success I've had, I think, because I always put what I wanted to do first, rather than what would make me the most money or something like that. And in particular, what would make me the most money. And maybe, I was again, I've been very fortunate. I was in a fortunate position that I could do that because I was, as you know, I was a university professor for most of the time that I've been doing this. And that gave me enough income that even if I made no money with what I was doing, I would be okay. So I could always afford to turn things down that I didn't want to do. And so I have to caveat that not everybody may have quite the luxury that I had, but within whatever constraints you have, I think what's works best for me is to just do what's fun and do what's enjoyable, and at least in my case, the money followed. So I certainly did make a significant amount of money, but it came from, I think, doing what I loved, and because I did what I loved, I apparently did good enough at it that people were willing to pay me for it. So that would be the number one thing I'd say.
Ted, given that, did you ever find that you had to force yourself to walk away, or is it one of those things that just because you enjoyed it so much, you worked maybe more than a lot of people would work?
Woodwork.
Woodwork, yeah.
It's been up and down. There was clearly a peak back in the early 2000s where my work got to the point where it was excessive. There was a point in which I was active as a college professor, trying to teach several courses a semester. In addition to that, I was working on the next edition of my book. I think at that point it must have been the first edition of Mac OS X Helpline. And which was, was a 1,000-page book, so that was a lot of work to do. I was still writing for Macworld, I was writing for Macworld magazine and writing several articles a month typically, at least one a month, sometimes more. And to top that, as if all that wasn't enough, I was in charge of MacFixit, which was posting updates 5, sometimes 6 days a week. And that probably took more time than anything else. I'd get up at 5:30 in the morning because it's on Pacific time, because that was already 8:30 in the East Coast, and I'd get up at 5:30 in the morning and start working on things and work probably straight through to lunchtime before I took my first break, and then spend the afternoon trying to do all those other things that I mentioned, and so it was more than a full-time job at that point, all those things added together. And my wife was in particularly not pleased with how little she was getting to see me. So, so yeah, that was probably more than I should have done. It was hard to turn any of those things away because I was enjoying all of them. So yeah, and wanted to do all of them, but eventually I did. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty darn good advice to do what you want to do, what you enjoy. The old saying, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I'm not quite sure that's true, but it definitely makes it a lot easier to get up in the morning and either go to a desk or go to an office or whatever with something you really enjoy.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to oversell it because I know there are people that can't afford to do what they want. What they want to do maybe makes no money, and they have to get food on the table. So I don't want to make it sound like it's that easy. But if you are in a position where there's a fork in the road and both of them are viable and one is more what you want, then that's, in terms of your enjoyment, that's the one I would go for, and I wouldn't worry so much about the money.
Sound advice. Sound advice. Well, I know, I'm sure everyone watching and listening joins me in wishing you the very best retirement, and hopes you will come back from time to time and share your wisdom and all that. And that's the plan, so that's as far as we'll go with that part.
Sure.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/MacVoices and use the code MacVoices when you place your order. I'm really excited to welcome back Casper as a sponsor of Mac Voices. That's because I own and sleep on a Casper mattress, and I sleep very well. The folks at Casper are a bit obsessive about their mattresses. Obsessive in their desire to deliver a high-quality mattress at a shockingly fair price. Shockingly? If you've been shopping for a mattress recently, shockingly is the word for it. Mattresses are expensive. Really expensive. Casper delivers a twin-size mattress for only $500 and a king-size for only $950. Now that's shocking, but in a good way, and if you use the code MacVoices, you save $50 off that price. Oh, and that's the price. No surprise shipping charges, no surprise service fees. Of course, the real question is, how good is the mattress? How well does it suit you? Casper mattresses are a combination of latex foam and memory foam that give you just the right sink, just the right bounce. Yes, those are mattress technical terms, to give you the best night's sleep possible. And let's not forget how you buy a Casper mattress. Just go to casper.com/MacVoices, pick your size, and your Casper mattress arrives at your doorstep. No annoying salespeople, no laying down on a mattress in a showroom floor trying to figure out what the difference is between this mattress and that. Just go to casper.com/MacVoices to get an American-made Casper mattress that you can try free for a full 100 days. In the unlikely event that it doesn't suit you, they have a painless return process. But believe me, after a week on a Casper, you're not about to return it. You're wondering if a Casper mattress can really be that good, right? There's only one way to find out. Right now, go to casper.com/MacVoices, pick the size mattress you need, and use the coupon code MacVoices to get $50 off their already amazing price. You're in for the best night's sleep you've had in a long time. Welcome back, and thanks to Casper for their support of Mac Voices. So let's start a new chapter, so to speak, and that is, now that you're retired, you are not required to follow up on Apple products and Apple developments, and you're not required to buy every single product that comes out so you can evaluate it. But we talked before the show, and you have ordered an Apple Watch. And I'm really intrigued by this because it sounded like you went through the process of maybe not being sure you were going to and then deciding you were going to. And given that decision now that a lot of us have them and there's so many articles out there, what are your thoughts on getting one, using one? What are you looking forward to?
Well, first of all, yes. The Apple Watch was the first major new product that Apple released that happened at a time when I no longer felt compelled that I had to get one simply so that I could write about it, because I knew that my retirement was coming. So I had the luxury again of saying, well, if I don't want it, I don't have to get it, because I don't have to have an article about troubleshooting Apple Watch for Macworld next week. And then I thought about it. I said, this is not something that's clear to me that I'm really going to be crazy about. Plus, there are the inevitable 1.0 problems that a new product has, and in fact, the fact that you couldn't get apps that were native to the watch yet, but they had to be run off of the iPhone, and that the native apps were coming later. Said, well, maybe I should wait for the native apps to come out. Then there was the issue. I started thinking, well, maybe I should wait a year to get one because when I'm not sure how the pricing is going to work. How much will it cost me to get an Apple Watch this year, and then in 12 months be ready to dump it because the new version is so much better. And what's the upgrade path? And all these questions occurred to me. I said, I'm not going to be one of these people that waits up till midnight Pacific time when the online sale started and order one as fast as I can, so that I hope that I can get one on April 24th or whatever the date was that they went on sale. So I just decided I wasn't going to do that. First time probably, and I didn't. And then I just let it go, and I think a couple of weeks went by, and I eventually made it to an Apple store and had a chance to play with them at the Apple store, and I enjoyed it. I thought, it's actually potentially more useful than I gave it credit for. The idea that I could actually do these things without taking my phone out of the pocket is as silly as it sometimes sounds. That's a major benefit of a phone. You don't have to take something out of your pocket. But I said, and I liked the interface better than I thought in terms of using it. And I said, I'm just going to order one. Once it arrives, I have 14 days to return it anyway if I don't like it, and so I can just see. So I did, and I just found out now. Yesterday I checked the status of my order. It's due to come the last week in June, so I still have a nice long wait before it even arrives. So, but yeah, so last week in June presumably I'll be getting one.
Great. Okay, we got to do it. Which one did you get? What band? What color? What size? All that.
I got the larger one, the 42 millimeter. And I got the Milanese loop.
Okay. And the sport model or stainless steel?
Stainless steel, yeah.
Stainless steel? Oh, wow. Okay. Ted, with all the literature, and I'm sure you've read some. I mean, you may not be doing it for research, but just for enjoyment. And anything that strikes you about what you think will be the great thing about the Apple Watch, or the things that people are saying they like that might apply to you?
Well, I think two things come to mind. One is simply notifications. I like the idea of being able to see what's going on. My phone is rather busy in my pocket most of the time. It's vibrating or making sounds. Getting a new email message. I'm getting a SMS text message. I'm getting email, getting a Twitter update. Periscope has its own little unique sound that it makes now. That I subscribe to that, and so all those little noises. Some of them I ignore, some of them I don't. Sometimes I ignore one and find out about it later and wish I hadn't ignored it because it turned out to be more important than I thought. Sometimes I'll take it out and say I wish I hadn't wasted my time checking on this and telling whoever I'm talking to wait a second because I want to see what this is or something. So it'll be nice to just be able to glance at your wrist and see what it is. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also actually looking forward to wearing a watch because I gave up on my watch broke and I decided not to get a new watch for the first time and just rely on my iPhone even to check the time. And so looking forward to just being able to look at my wrist and see what time it is when I want to. That'll be nice too. Some of the health things I think I will make use of. But beyond that, I also think down the road, I think the watch will be more and more useful for controlling things around the house, a sort of Internet of Things. And I think more so than the phone, you'll be able to you'll be able to just walk into your house and maybe look at your phone, speak to it, whatever, or just do some tapping on it and do all sorts of things in your house, controlling your TV, controlling your kitchen appliances, controlling your lighting, controlling your alarm system, your thermostat. The Apple Watch can become a hub for controlling everything in your home. even more, it'll indirectly be through the phone, but I think it'll be a lot more convenient to be through the watch. I'm looking forward to that as the apps get more sophisticated.
The only piece of advice I would give you, and you're sophisticated enough to understand it, is when you start to set your watch up, don't sync it with your iPhone and tell it to copy everything over. Because you'll spend much more time. I don't know how many apps you have on your phone, but I have more than I should. A lot that I need to clean out, and this almost became a motivation to clean them out. But everything that has some kind of watch notification or watch interface or whatever, especially if your phone is that busy in your pocket, your watch will drive you crazy. I would have been much smarter to just say no. I'm going to load them on one at a time.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I would do.
Yeah, but other than that, I think you'll love it, and I think you're spot on. I think that this version, if your expectations are correct, it'll be very valuable. Moving forward, it's just going to become more valuable and more useful.
Yeah, well, I think so. I think it's never going to be as big as the phone. It almost by definition can't be, because really its audience are iPhone users. And so unless every iPhone user gets one, it's by definition not going to be as successful as the iPhone. But I think as a product, it can still be very successful. And I think a year from now, when people are judging whether the first year of the Apple Watch was a success or not, I'm pretty confident that the answer is going to be yes, it was.
It's funny, I was in a meeting today, and I was receiving text from someone that was supposed to be calling into the meeting. And I was able to respond on my watch with the canned responses, thanks, or, we'll text soon, or whatever. And it really was interesting that I'm able to do it completely surreptitiously. Nobody else knew that I was receiving these messages. But if I had to pull my phone out, it would have been very obvious that I was distracted and was not listening to what was going on. So it was really the first experience of that kind that I've had, and just shows me how valuable the watch is.
Yeah, that's a two-edged sword for me, though. I mean, a negative way to interpret what you're saying is that you could be distracted and oblivious to what's going on around you, but nobody will know, as opposed to with your iPhone when everybody will know. So,
fair point. But at the same time, I didn't feel like I was disrupting anything by carrying on that text conversation, and it was necessary for the meeting and the scheduling of the meeting. So I wasn't cheating and ordering a pizza or anything, but it just felt much less disruptive, instead of the speaker looking over and seeing, oh, he's playing with his phone again, that. So it just one more Apple Watch experience to put on the onto the microscope.
Well, one of my concerns, and maybe you can answer it as someone who has one already, is that it will become one of the things I might get irritated about is that it now becomes another device that I have to charge every night, because the charge isn't going to last more than one day. And something else that I have to monitor when I go on in an airplane, they say put things in airplane mode. It's one other thing I have to worry about, perhaps. Or when I go into a movie theater, I don't want the screen to light up every time I move my arm, because that's going to violate their no screens policy. So I have to put it into some mode that will prevent that from happening, and so on and so on. And will I just say we'll get to a point where I will say, are the irritations worth the benefits? And I'm assuming it's yes, obviously, or I wouldn't have ordered one, but maybe you could talk about that.
I know there's a setting to put it in sleep mode, or essentially, if you really want to, airplane mode. That one's pretty easy. And then, you're done. I know there's a setting to turn the screen off. I really haven't needed to look for that, so I haven't gone and found it. Yeah, I see your point, but I think those are minor nuances. They're no different than my phone. I've obviously the phone isn't going to light up every time I raise my wrist, but on the other hand, the phone will, the screen will light up every time I get a notification. So if it's in my pocket, that's not as big a deal, but still. The battery life, it's funny, Ted. I was thinking about that today. The battery life was huge concern, big concern, and that was going to be the downfall of Apple Watch. And it's barely talked about now, because it does last a good long day. I have not run out of battery life yet, even on some really long days. the charging thing, it's always fascinated me that people seem to fight the idea of just setting up a charging station on their dresser or on their nightstand or whatever, and plug your phone in, and now, attach the charger to my watch, and it's easy. It's right there. Obviously, I'm not going to sleep with my phone, so it's just a non-issue for me. It just becomes part of my routine, just like taking my wallet out and putting it on the dresser, taking the belt off and putting it in the drawer. The phone and now the watch go in their appropriate places. And I built the watch habit up having used a Pebble now for over a year. So, and the battery life on that Pebble was a lot worse than it is a lot better, than it is on the phone, because you could go for a few days. But why risk it? Why not just charge it and walk away and, be done with it?
And I think people are very different in their habits. That's the other thing I've gleaned from some reading stuff. I remember when the iPhone 6 and 6S came out, occasionally somebody would say, 6S, 6 Plus, sorry. Occasionally when someone would explain why they got the 6 Plus over the 6, one of the things they would mention is that the battery life is a little bit better because it's bigger, and how valuable that was to them, because it could make the difference between the phone running out at the end of the day and not. And I was thinking, my phone never runs out at the end of the day. I mean, maybe 3 times a year I have to worry about not making it through the day for my phone. I just don't use it in a way that drains the battery that much, I guess, compared to other people. I don't spend enough time. I think talking on the phone is probably one of the biggest battery drains. And so if you use it mostly for checking text messages and Twitter updates and stuff like that, surfing a couple of web pages, it isn't going to drain the battery nearly as fast as if you sit on the phone for an hour and a half or something like that. So, which I never do. So yeah, I think there's a big difference between how much the battery will be a problem for some people versus others. I suspect for me it will be less of a problem. I agree with you.
Yeah, but based on my experience and the way you're talking about using it, yeah, sure. The first couple of days you're going to be playing with it constantly, and you may see it, get down to something that's a little uncomfortable. But I think once you just put it into normal usage, it's just not an issue. It's just not an issue. You said you got the Milanese loop.
Yes.
Okay, going to be really interested to see what you think about that. I've only seen one in the store. I have not wrapped one of those around my wrist.
I did when I tried them on at the store, and I liked it very much.
Yeah,
that's what convinced me to get it.
Yeah,
I've always leaned towards metal bands. All the watches I've had when I used one, like I said, I have stopped in the last year or two. But when I had watches, I've always had metal bands. I never liked belt loop type bands, where you have to stick a little pin in a hole and then, like you do with a belt. I really dislike those. I like the ones that I can just sort of slip on and slip off with maybe a clasp to get it tight, like a bracelet. But the one that's closest to the type of watches that I used to have is the one that cost, I think, over $1,000, and I wasn't going to spend that much money. So the Milanese loop was close enough, and I liked the way it looked, actually. So
yeah. The bracelet, that would have been my first choice too. And it might be the only thing that I thought was just a little much. But I guess, the way Apple did it, I know that the design of that is different than any other link bracelet out there. It lets it be totally adjustable on every single link. So, I give them that they have it. It's just, that was just a little too pricey for me. So, and we'll see what else comes out. It's funny, we haven't seen the third-party bands, I don't think, hit yet. In any significant way, but they're coming. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure you can't, as far as I know, you can't buy an Apple Watch right now without a band. You have to get some band with it. So I'm hoping that will change next year, especially for the more expensive ones. I mean, like if they come out with a version 2.0 Apple Watch, I'm assuming that they're not going to change the design sufficiently that the bands this year will be obsolete. So if, for instance, if I wanted to stick with the Milanese loop next year, and then I would need to get a new stainless steel Apple Watch face. And I'm hoping that I could get that without having to pay for another Milanese loop to go with it. So we'll see how that works out.
I'm curious, though, why the stainless? especially when already you're talking about if another version comes out. Why don't you go to the stainless?
I just because it felt and looked a lot nicer. I tried on the sport watches, and to me, they clearly were, for my taste. I know people say this will be different, but for my taste, they clearly were sports watches. I mean, it isn't something I'd want to wear all day when I wasn't jogging or exercising or doing something active. It isn't something I'd want to wear if I was going out to dinner and wanted a nice watch to wear out to dinner or something like that. And so and again, I have, like I already told you, I have an affinity for metal watch bands, and clearly the sports watch bands weren't that. And so I said, well, I can afford it, so let's just go for it. So. Simple as that.
Yeah. It's good you didn't have the affinity for gold, or we'd be talking about the edition.
No, I think we talked about that last time. I wrote a column a couple months ago, which I said that I thought the gold iWatch was just ridiculous. So, I mean, when I saw them in the store when I went there, and I mean, and we can talk about it, and I'm sure there are pros and cons, but I looked at it and I said, I can't even tell that it's gold. There's a gold iPhone and a gold MacBook Pro that you can get now, and if somebody told me this was the same sort of gold tinted aluminum, steel, whatever that those were, I mean, maybe I could. To be fair, I could probably tell it wasn't quite that. But if somebody basically said this wasn't gold, it was really just something made to look like gold, I'd believe them. I mean, it wasn't, and of course, it doesn't. The workmanship is no different, really, than and certainly the watch itself can't do one thing that the cheaper watches can't do. And so the idea that you would spend $17,000, which is what I think the upper end ones cost, minimum of 10, upwards to $17,000 on a watch, just because it's made of this gold. I mean, if you really like gold, I suppose it could matter. But if I had, it's not even a question of being able. The typical answer is, well, some people can afford to do that, so they can do it, just like I can afford to get the stainless steel one. And I suppose, if you're, if you're Beyonce or something like that, and $10,000 doesn't mean much, you can get it. But even so, I'd be tempted to say, God, get 10 stainless steel ones. Forget the gold, and then have one for each day of the week, and then give 3 away to friends. I mean, it just doesn't seem worth it to me.
And don't have to change watch bands; just have buy a watch for each band. No, I'm with you. I look at it. I just, and I think we have touched on this before, but it's worth repeating, that the amount of conversation that has generated, positive and negative. I guess maybe that's why they did it. To have just something elite and that would require people to talk about it. But yeah, I looked at it and said, not for me, thank you.
Not for anybody, really. Other than because it's something that you do when you're in the watch industry, I guess. It's not even clear to me why Apple made this watch to begin with. It seems uncharacteristic of them, but they're in an uncharacteristic field. So this is their first foray into something where the fashion statement matters more almost than the technology to the typical buyer.
Right. But they've been in the fashion business to some degree, to some limited degree, maybe not fashion, but the design business, for as long as we all can remember. So yes, maybe this was just a natural extension when you're going for something that you're going to strap on your body.
Absolutely. Design has always been important at Apple, and it's been important to me. I mean, one of the reasons I always liked Apple products over PCs is I go into a store and look at a PC and I'd say, this looks like it was put together by a 12th grader for a science project. This is not what I want to use. And so Apple products, from a design point of view, was always great. But even beyond design, I think fashion is something different than design. And people buy, when you go into a store to buy a traditional watch, you almost nobody these days, especially with watches being what they are, almost nobody asks, how does the watch work? How accurate is it? What CPU is inside? I mean, these are not questions that. This looks nice. Yeah, I like the way that. What do you think, dear? Does this look good? Okay, that's the one I'm going to get. Looks good. Maybe there's a couple of features some people want if they're going to get a digital watch. Does it have the some nautical feature or something like that for some people. But basically, I think people buy watches on how well they look to be constructed and how well they look, period.
Have you ever been a watch guy, Ted?
No, not like Dave Hamilton, apparently.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
he's a watch person. I can't hold a candle to that. No.
Yeah.
Watches have always been something functional to me. And I always liked, because of my interest in computers, I guess, and digital technology, I loved it when digital watches came out. I thought they were, get rid of that clock face already. And the digital watch made so much sense, and so much more sense, and you could do more things with it. And then the whole digital watch thing just seemed to go away. After a while, digital watches were relegated to sports watches, basically. And if you wanted anything that looked nice, it was back to the analog face. And I guess, and I have some understanding, again, from a fashion point of view, why that would be the case. But it never suited me. I kept going, for a while there, I kept going to stores and saying, don't you have any nice watches that are digital? No. No, we don't. Not anymore. We used to, but they're all gone.
None of this. Let me show you this one, sir. Just no.
That's right. Yeah. So that's the way it is. And of course, with the Apple Watch, you can make it whatever you want. That's one of the neat things about it. It can have an analog face or a digital face.
So one more topic before we wrap this up. You could buy a top-end Apple Watch for around $17,000. I wonder what percentage of an Apple car that's going to be.
I don't know. You can buy a car. That could be the 100% of the cost of some cars that you could get these days. But
yeah. What do you think of the Apple Car thing? Because I'm making an exception because this is not an Apple product. But it's more than a rumor this time.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think we may have talked about this once before, but and my view hasn't changed. If we have, I view it the same way I view the Apple Television. I always thought that the Apple Television was a low probability bet. I like the idea of an Apple Television because I, in principle, I like the idea because I like the idea of Apple having 100% control of the experience as opposed to having to plug into something that Samsung made or something like that. And I was sure that if they did, it would be a better experience than any other TV that I could get. But so I wasn't averse to it. I wasn't saying, gee, it would be terrible. I was saying I just can't see Apple doing it. I can't see Apple getting into a business. The TV business is such a cutthroat business with low margins and a lot of competition, and you have to have 17, 25, whatever different models of different sizes and then how does it fit into the Apple Store? You're used to going into Apple Store and seeing all these things on display. Are they really going to start having a whole section of these large screen television? What if these days very large has become commonplace. These days, most people who can afford it are getting 50, 55, 60, 70-inch TVs. Is a small little Apple Store suddenly going to be filled up with 70-inch TVs that cover a wall like they do at Best Buy or something like that? And then there's all the technology that goes into a television that's totally different from what Apple has done before. So it just seemed to me that it would be simpler and more efficient and more Apple-like to stick with expanding the Apple TV box that they have, the little set-top box, as opposed to an actual television. And I actually think, for the moment anyway, that's what's happened. According to what I've read, the one article I read, I think it was from the Wall Street Journal, that said Apple officially gave up on doing their own television about a year ago. And for all the rumors point to a major new upgrade of the Apple TV set-top box coming at WWDC next month, which I'm really looking forward to, by the way. So I think Apple has done exactly what I was thinking when I was giving it thought these past couple of years. And I sort of think the reason I'm going into all this is I sort of give the same analysis to the car. I think Apple would be better served by having some sort of arrangement with car dealers where they sort of take over the whole digital entertainment, GPS, system of various cars, and make deals with various car manufacturers to do it. So, almost like you can go into AT&T or Verizon or Sprint and buy an iPhone. It's a Sprint iPhone, an AT&T iPhone, Verizon iPhone. Apple has deals with all of them. I can imagine Apple trying to do something like that with car dealers, where essentially, here's our Apple digital system, and you can buy a Ford with an Apple digital system, or you can buy a Toyota with an Apple digital system. CarPlay, I think, is a beginning step in that direction, but I think they probably have far bigger plans than that. And that makes a lot more sense to me than having Apple have to build a car with an engine, and wheels and brakes, and things that Apple has never had to deal with before. And unless they enter into some agreement with one particular company who is going to supply all the components like wheels and brakes that Apple doesn't do, which I don't think is all that likely, but could be the case. But otherwise, I can't see them just opening up a car manufacturing plant themselves and starting to manufacture cars. I'll be really shocked if that happens.
Your vision is very interesting, especially in light of some of the stories that I've been reading recently. And forgive me because I didn't file them away because I didn't really think about it in exactly this fashion, where some of the operating systems for these vehicles are now you're not supposed to be able to work on them. Mm-hmm. You're not, because you're only licensing the software that runs your car. Mm-hmm. So what happens when the software crashes and you try to do anything or whatever? If you aren't licensed or whatever, well, your car just sits there. Mm-hmm. So what? But the idea of being able to plug in an Apple OS, essentially, mm-hmm. not a Mac OS, but an Apple OS to your vehicle, that's kind of intriguing. Mm-hmm. That's kind of intriguing. On the TV set, though, I heard somebody say the other day that, and I'm sorry, I'd love to give credit to the podcast that I heard it on, but I can't because I don't remember, that they don't use the features of a smart TV because they're just too hard to access, too hard to control. The experience is horrible. That they would rather plug something like an Apple TV, a Chromecast, a Fire TV in, because the interface is better. The whole experience, even though they might have to deal with a separate remote, they'd rather do that and have that better experience. And so I thought that's really interesting that if the TV manufacturers, they've been trying to shove all this stuff on there as a sales mechanism, if they would just concentrate on delivering a great TV with as good a sound as you can get out of a flat panel and leave some of the smart stuff to an external box for a better experience, win-win-win.
I certainly agree with them. I mean, I use the Apple TV over the smart features that are built into the TVs that I have, and I think the TV manufacturers are still trying to get a competitive edge. If you have these features built into the TV, it saves somebody the cost of spending another $70, $100, $150 on a separate device and having a separate remote control and separate complications and separate hookup and all that sort of stuff. Then I can see where it would be appealing for some people to have it and just depend on the smart. I know a few people that have smart TVs, and that's what they use to get onto Netflix and everything else. For me, like I said, I'd rather have the Apple TV, and it can get, and I'd rather settle on one thing. That's the other thing. If you have a sophisticated setup like I have at home, you can have a Blu-ray player that has Netflix built into it. You can have a TV that has Netflix built into it. You have an Apple TV that has Netflix built into it, and maybe something else too. Who knows? You can have you sit down in front of your TV and you have 4 different ways that you can access Netflix. I mean, it's excessive. We ultimately don't need that. Hopefully, down the road, things will simplify to the point where they'll turn out to be a preferred way that people like to access things like Netflix, and that's. And maybe there'll be more than one brand. There could be a Roku brand and an Apple brand competing with each other for the same sort of technology. But there won't be 4 or 5 different technologies that are providing that sort of service and overlapping, and each with like you said, each with their own interface. So even if you go from the Apple TV to the Blu-ray player to access Netflix, you're accessing Netflix in a way that looks totally different and is not at all convenient.
I think
that, once again, I no. My wife and I have not unexpectedly had a kid. As once again our mixed breed Siamese cat demonstrating her heritage. So.
And she's got quite a set of vocal cords there. or whatever a cat has.
Yeah, she just walks around and does that for no apparent reason at odd times of days.
She wants your attention.
Yeah.
The one thing that I haven't seen this written up anywhere, it's not a rumor, folks, it's just something I'd really love, is if Apple, because you're plugging the Apple TV into your set, your screen, I'd love to have a way that Apple TV could read what your TV is, what kind, what model, all that, and then let me get rid of the remote that the TV gives me and let me use a new Apple remote. Because, I mean, they still sell them. You know, the universal remotes where you got to hunt through the code or figure out the code that matches. And wouldn't it be great if the Apple TV just plugged in and said, here, just use our remote for everything?
Oh, absolutely. That would be great. And I think they're maybe moving in that direction. They have a new remote, supposedly, that's coming out with the new Apple TV, and maybe it will have more of that features. For me, it's not perfect, not ideal, but as good as I could do. My solution to that was to go with a Logitech remote. It can be a pain to set up. You know, they were talking about codes. There's much more. Having to set up a Logitech remote can take an hour before you get all set up the way you want, or more for some people, I suppose. But once it's set up correctly, it works pretty dreamily, and it does 95 to 100% of what I would need other remotes to do. And so, I can go months without ever using any other remote besides the Logitech remote, and it works beautifully. The one thing, as we're talking about this, one thing that I did confront, I had one, I have TVs in 3 different rooms. I hope that's not too unusual, but I do. And one of them that I had was an older flat panel TV, an old Sony LCD TV that had only one HDMI input. And I now had several devices that I wanted to plug into this TV. I finally got an Apple TV for that TV. It was one of the main thing that tripped it, which required an HDMI input. And so I thought, how can I do this? And so I started investigating it and discovered that you can get, as I expected, it wasn't a big shock, that you can get HDMI switchers. Essentially, it's like a USB hub where you can plug in 3, 4, 5 HDMI devices, and then the device itself plugs into the television, and then you tell the device which one you want. And I found out, after going through this a little bit, that there was one device, I forget the name of the company, it begins with a K, not Canex, but some company like that, that had a remote, so that you could change the HDMI input number via a remote. And I said, well, this would be great if the Logitech recognized this remote and I could coordinate all this together. And sure enough, it did. And so now I can, when I want to go, say, from my TV to my Apple TV to my Blu-ray player, I just press TV, Apple TV, or Blu-ray player on my Logitech remote, and it makes all the necessary changes, including changing the HDMI input from the hub. So.
I know I have not had any experience with the Logitechs. I've heard of so many good things about them, and Logitech products that's the camera I'm using right now. They just do such a great job. Mm-hmm. So it's not exactly a surprise that you would get that endorsement. I just, at this point, I'll wait and see what comes next, and maybe that'll be something I need to invest in, because it sure would be nice just to have one device.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the downside is you have to set it up on a computer. So somebody who doesn't like using their computer or doesn't have a computer can't use it. But if you're facile using computers, then it's just fine.
I've got 1 or 2 laying around here that
I think you could handle it.
Yeah, I can handle it.
So I strongly suspect that's the case.
Well, Ted, I'm so happy for you with the retirement. I'm doubly happy that this is not goodbye from you on MacVoices and MacNotables. I'm sorry it won't be quite as often, but I'm overjoyed that we will continue to do it, and we'll continue to benefit from your wisdom and your insight, even if it's not quite as often. We'll just have to fly a little longer solo in between times.
Well, thanks. And let me turn it back the other way for a moment. You know from having read the article that at the end of the article, I try to give thanks to all the people that helped in various ways for me to do whatever it is I've managed to do all these years, and called out several in particular, and you were one of them. And it's been great working with you, and it's made a big difference. And perhaps the main reason, if not the only reason, that I intend to keep doing this post-retirement is because I so much enjoy working with you. So it's been great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I saw that. I was, pardon me, I was honored to be included. It was a great list of people, and I'm sure that you're on a lot of other people's lists too. No question. So we will see you again when we see you, but we will definitely see you.
Definitely.
And as an aside that nobody else needs to really know about, but we will be getting together for dinner in San Francisco before WWDC.
We definitely will. I don't remember exactly when, but we'll do it, and maybe even more than once if you're around long enough. I'll be happy to. And that will probably after WWDC will be the next time we do a get together. We can talk about whatever happened there.
That's perfect. That's perfect. So I'll see you in San Francisco.
Definitely looking forward to it.
Great. Folks, we'll see you right back here on MacVoices and MacNotables. We hope you'll join us. Ted will be back. I'll be back, and you never know who's coming next. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting MacVoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.